Hello, my name is Jacob Rohr, and the topic that I've chosen for my final project of the year is the topic of gambling addiction. Now, up until a few years ago, I had never been involved or known of a situation that involved gambling addiction, but it was an experience that I had a few years ago that prompted me and influenced me to write a paper on gambling addiction and to know what the role of the pastor or the chaplain is in a situation that involves gambling addiction. You see, I was at a previous church, and at this other church I was confronted with a counseling situation where a young woman came to me and she shared that her husband was a gambling addict and that he had just recently relapsed. And she wanted to know what she should do, and she wanted to know what advice I could give her. And after I found myself in shock and awe, after I got over that for a few seconds, I realized that I knew nothing about gambling addiction, let alone giving her practical advice about what she should do in that moment. And so writing this paper has definitely helped me a lot and to clarify what gambling addiction is and what the pastor or the chaplain should do in that situation. And I hope that you find this as valuable as I have found it myself. So it's good to start with asking, what is gambling addiction? Well, the act of gambling is risking money or something of value with the hope of winning more in return. And so a gambling addict is someone who repeatedly or habitually engages in this activity, even though it may hurt themselves or those around them. And so how many people does gambling addiction affect? Well, in a study that I cite in my paper, around 80 to 85% of people who gamble do so responsibly. They don't have any problems. But there is a smaller group of the gambling population known as problem gamblers. And these are people who gamble even though their gambling patterns negatively affect them in their life. And this makes up 2 to 3% of the gambling population. And there's even a smaller category known as pathological gambling. And the people who fit into this category make up 1 to 3% of the gambling population. And these are the most severe and destructive cases of gambling addiction. And so gambling addiction, whether it's moderate or severe, isn't all that prevalent or common, but when it is there, it is very destructive, as we'll see in a moment. And so what is the damage that is caused by excessive gambling? Well, firstly, there is relationship damage. Just like with any other addiction, gambling addiction takes its toll on the relationships around the gambler. And I cite a few real-life instances in my paper about people who have lived with gambling addicts and the stress and the hurt that it causes them. And so in relationships, trust is broken. There's secrecy on the part of the person who gambles, and if they're confronted, they make excuses, they deflect, they shift responsibility, and they don't take any responsibility for themselves. And so gambling addiction, much like other addictions, really erodes the relationship capital that person has with other people. Secondly, there's financial damage. To be able to feed the addiction of gambling, one normally uses money. And so even if that money is supposed to go towards taking care of their family or themselves, the person who struggles with gambling will take that money and use it for themselves to feed their addiction, even if it hurts other people. Additionally, domestic violence and abuse is high in the homes of those with gambling addicts, and specifically children of gamblers face neglect and maltreatment, and suicide rates are very high among gamblers. And so what is the role of the pastor or the chaplain when dealing with a situation of gambling and gambling addiction? And I'll only mention one. The rest of these steps are in the paper, but the biggest thing that I have learned is that the pastor and the chaplain need to be aware. They need to be knowledgeable about the issues surrounding gambling addiction, what it looks like, and what help that they can provide the family of the gambler and maybe the gambler themselves. And I find that just being aware of the issues, knowing what it looks like, knowing what it is, what it isn't, and where to direct people is of immense benefit. And so if I had that situation happen a few years ago, if that happened today, I would have a much different response than I did back then because I'm more knowledgeable and I'm more aware of the issues than I was then. So I hope this paper helps you. I hope that you find it enlightening and that you're able to take some of the things that you learn in this paper, that you're able to learn from it. And if you ever do find yourself in a situation like this, that you would be ready, that you would be aware, and that you would be equipped to help people. So, God bless.